In this video, we're going to talk about multidimensional arrays. So in the last video, we talked about regular single dimensional arrays where we just have like a row of numbers. So in this case, we're going to expand that to 2 dimensions. Okay. And we can go more than two. We're not going to, but I don't know that there's a practical limit on how many dimensions that you can get. But after three, it gets a little difficult to manage intellectually. Okay. So we're going to talk about what multidimensional arrays are, how we declare them, how we initialize them, and then we're going to use loops to go through the elements, just like we did with single dimensional arrays. Okay. So I have on the screen here just a basic array, just a quick review of what we've done so far. So we're going to continue this idea. C++, unlike Python, doesn't keep track of the size of your arrays. So there's no out of bounds error given. So we have to manually do that. So I'm going to go always do a constant int for the size. So here's where I'm declaring an array. It will be all zeros mostly. We don't want to trust that, but that's usually how it works. And then for our loops, remember we're doing the I starting at 0, less than size. So the valid indexes for an array of size 10 are 0 to 9. Okay, so we keep that in mind there. And I'm just printing them out. So this doesn't really do anything. Okay. So the idea of this multidimensional array then is that we're going to have an array of arrays. Okay. So what's inside our array will be another array. Okay. So for this, we're going to need two different constants here. So we're going to have a row. Let's set it equal to 3. And we're going to have a column as well. Okay. So I'll do a constant int on call equal to 3. Okay. And again, it's possible that you may want to place these up in the global space. Just depends on how your program's going to work. Okay. So we're now going to be able to create a 3 by 3. So mathematically, we would call this a matrix. So there's lots of things that these 2D arrays can represent. Could be a tic-tac-toe board, could be a spreadsheet of some sort, it could be a chessboard, it could be just a list of students and grades or whatever kinds of tabular data that we're looking for. Okay. So now that we have this, we're going to declare our array. We're not just declaring it on size, we're declaring it by row and column to make it a 3 by 3. Okay. So we now have done exactly what we did before as far as declaring it. Okay. We don't have any data in it. It should be zeros, we would hope. Again, the AR here, the array name, is nothing but a memory address. If we print AR, that's what we get. Okay. Um, so at its starting place, but this time, instead of our integers are 4 bytes. So instead of doing before we had 10 4 bytes for 40, we're now going to have 3 times 3 or 9 bytes, which are 4. Okay. So we have 27. Okay. So the 27 consecutive spaces. And 00 again means that we're not going to modify anything from the original address. Okay. So that's why 00 is our first element. Okay. So now that we've declared it, okay, or while we're declaring it, we can also go ahead and initialize it. And there's a special way we tend to type these. Okay. So I'm going to put on the first row ending with the curly brace. Okay. And then I'm going to put in curly braces again. So we're in double curly braces here. 1, 2, 3 in curly braces. So I'm still inside of this set. So this is my first row. Okay. I'm going to hit a comma because we're putting these are the arrays that are in the array. Okay, again, it's an array of arrays. Hit enter again. It's going to drop us down and line us up. Okay, Emacs will do this for us. We'll do 4, 5, 6, curly brace, another comma, 7, comma, 8, comma, 9. Okay, and then at the end of that, we have our second curly brace followed by a semicolon. Okay. Do you have to do it this way? You don't. Okay. But as you can see, this gives the idea of a 3 by 3 matrix. Okay. And it's what I want to see in your code. Okay. I think it just helps us at this point to figure stuff out. Okay. So to access any element inside of here, and we'll forget the looping for now. Okay. So if I wanted to print out the 6, for example, Okay, I could see out AR. What row am I in? Okay, 6 is in row 0, 1. Second row has a 1. Okay. What column am I in? 0, 1, 2. Okay. So 1, 2 would give us the 6. Okay. So again, that's at the second column, sorry, second row, third column. Okay. Because remember, we're adding 1 at each time. Okay. So we can access that however we want to do it. Okay. Again, if we're going to use a loop to go through and print things out or to do any kind of modifications, just like we did with arrays before, it's important to remember we're going to go from 0, 0. Okay. If we're going from 1 to 9, it's 0, 0 to 0, 1 to 0, 2. Okay. So that's the first row. We then want to switch to 1, 0, 1, 1, and 1, 2 for positions. We just saw that the 1, 2 is a 6. And then finally a 2, 0, 2, 1, and 2, 2. So that's what we're headed for as far as the values. Okay. So the 0, we're going to go through a 0, 0, 0 first, and then a 1, 2, 3 with those, and then the 1s and the 2s the same way. Okay. So we're going to do this with with nested for loops. Okay. So to get the rows, we're going to say for int, and I'm going to do an R here, R equals 0, R less than row. Okay. Not less than or equal to, because we don't want that top value. 3 is not valid in any of our, in the list we have above here, there's no 3s. Okay. R plus plus. Get the right parentheses there. Okay. That's not what I want. There's a spacing. Okay. So inside of that, go put the bottom one in so I don't get lost. I'm going to do another for loop. I'm going to say for int c equals 0, c less than column, c plus plus. Okay. And to make sure we're on the right track here, I'm just going to go ahead for right now and just see out row, tab, column. And this should go 0, 0, 0, 1, and so forth. Okay. I have to get rid of this because we don't have any of that anymore. Okay. So let's go ahead and compile this, make sure I'm not doing something crazy, which I may be. Typos are a real thing, especially with my typing. I type really fast, but really inaccurately sometimes. Okay, so let me go ahead and compile this. Again, I'm not using a -o, but you should. Okay, looks like we're okay. Gonna run it. 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 0, 2, 1, 2, 2. And it did correctly print out the 6 from before. Okay. So now that I'm confident that we have the right stuff, I can replace this with the actual array position with RC. Okay. But I probably don't want to do an indel. So I'm going to print out here the AR at RC, row and column. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a tab character here. So as I go through each row, I'm going to do a tab. So I probably want to have a new line character at the end of each row. So how do I know I'm at the end of a row? Okay, so right here where the cursor is now, I'll be done with the row. So I'll pick up here, R being 0. R stays 0 as C goes to 0, 1, 2. Then this ends, and I go back for another round to get R equal 1. So at this point, I can do a C out end L, and that should bring us over. Okay. Go ahead and get rid of all this stuff just to keep us somewhat neat and not have extraneous things. Okay. So you run this, and we do get the 1, 2, 3, a new line for a 4, 5, 6, and then a new line again for a 7, 8, 9. Okay. So that's the way you want to do things for sure. So now let's say we want to modify our array. Same basic idea. Okay, we're going to go through and we're going to double each element. Okay, and I'm probably going to want to print to, that's the wrong program. Let me go to the correct program. There we go. I'm probably going to want to keep the print. So let me call this a matrix, actually. That's what we normally call it. I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to go ahead. Some of you are having trouble with your kills and yanks, your control Ks and your control Ys and Emacs. So I think the thing is you're probably delaying too much when you hit the control K. I'm going to start hitting control K and I'm not going to stop. Hit, 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 hit. And then I hit the control Y to put it back where it was. Okay. I'm then going to go back where I want the new thing to be. I'm going to move to the beginning so my spacing's not weird. Hit control Y again, and there it is. Okay. If your spacing is ever weird, and I am a little weird there, if you hit the tab key, I'm just hitting the tab key and the down arrow, it will space everything out for you properly. Okay. Again, that's Emacs doing that. Nothing to do with C++. Okay. So we have our loop before. Again, we're going to, since we're declaring the variables here, we can reuse them with impunity. We have no issues there. But inside of this, I'm just going to let ARC be equal to ARRC, RC. So the current row and column through my counters times 2. Okay. Run this, see what we get. Okay. And it didn't do anything. Why didn't it do anything? That's very interesting. Okay, let me see why it didn't do anything. Oh, well, no, I've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. Okay. Here I'm going through with AR. And for each of these, I'm setting ARRC. Should be okay. And then I'm printing it out. It's very strange. I like when I have errors. That way I get to figure out what in the heck that I'm doing. Okay. So it should be the same. Did I recompile? Maybe I didn't recompile. I recompiled. Still not working. So strange. Let's take a look. So here's what I do when things aren't working. So am I getting inside of here? I don't know. If I'm not, oh, 100% see the problem. There we go. Let me show you what I was going to do. To make sure I'm getting this loop, I'm going to input just some trash. Okay, that I'll know to take out later. So now when I run it, yeah, I'm getting there. It's just not making a change. And the reason it's not making a change, some of you are probably yelling at the screen. I hope that you are. I put 2 equal signs here. Remember, 2 equal signs is asking a question. Is this equal to itself times 2? The answer is no. Okay. But I'm not doing anything with it. That's what I want. That will fix it. Again, I don't take these errors out. I think it's worthwhile seeing. Now we have our double. Okay. So I feel better about life now. Okay. So again, we're going through element by element from 0, 0 to 0, 1 to 0, 2, and then to 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, and so forth. Okay. So let's take another example, more of a real world example. Okay. Let's say we're going to create a program. I'm going to call this student grades or just grades. Okay. So I'm going to have to include my IO stream always. This should be second nature to you using namespace standard. Okay. I don't think I'm going to be asking for any integer input, so I didn't include my utils with the getInt function. Okay. I would just like to say that there are many other computer science faculty I've talked to who say that freshmen especially just can't learn how to use Emacs. It's too complicated. And I know that if you're in my class, I've seen you use Emacs every day. So congratulations, you've done the impossible. I knew you could do it. Okay, we have our int main here. Okay. So the idea here, we're going to have 3 students and we're going to have 4 test scores each. Okay. So if we weren't using arrays, this would be a real pain, right? Even with the single dimension arrays, we could keep an array of the students, but then we would have to somehow coordinate that with the array of the grades, and it would get messy real quick. Okay. So what we're going to do then, we're going to have this idea that we're going to have three students, four arrays are going to be in this array. The array is just going to be of test scores, but each row will be its own student. Okay. So we won't have names of the students, but in the first row, we'll have student one or student zero to be consistent, have their test scores, their four test scores. Student zero will have student one will have their four test scores, then student two will have theirs. Okay. So let's go ahead and create our uh, size here. Row is equal to 3 for the students. It's unhappy with something. What's it unhappy with? Oh, I made it a TXT file for some unknown reason. That's the other thing with Emacs. Other editors, I'm sure, do the same thing, but I know Emacs does. It's going to take care of you in that it's going to let you know that something weird is going on by not automatically doing things for you. Okay. So again, using namespace standard. All right, main. I was so impressed with your ability to use Emacs, I totally lost my mind. It happens. Okay. So again, this is going to be array of grades where we have three students and four test scores. Note that this is a pretty limited example because unlike in Python, unlike Python lists, arrays in C++ cannot get any bigger. So we're always and forever in this array going to have only three students and four test scores. So you probably would want to build in some extra capacity if you're doing a real thing. Okay. So we're going to call this scores. Okay. And like before, we're going to initialize it with, I didn't do that yet because I did it and it was wrong. Constant int row or rows. I forgot what I did last time. Doesn't really matter. As long as you're consistent. Three, that's for the three students. Constant int calls is now four for four test scores. Okay. So I'm now going to initialize this to rows. I think I just did row and column. Doesn't really matter. You should be more consistent than I am, so you won't have to think about it. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and initialize this as I do it. Okay. So I'm going to say equals curly brace. Okay. I'm now going to enter the test scores. Curly braces again. 85, 90, 78, and 92 for the first row, comma, hit return. We're going to do 76. We're going to do 88, 91. Numbers don't matter here, really. 85. And then for the last student, they're going to have a 90, an 80, an 85, and an 88. Okay? Going to have two curly braces there. Or sometimes folks will put this on its own line as well, if you want. Whatever makes you happy on that one. Okay? But by doing this way, we can kind of see what's going on. Okay? And now let's say we want to go through and we want to calculate an average score for each student. So an average for each student. Okay? So for student one, just to keep track, this is going to be, we're going to take scores sub 0, 0 for the 85, 0, 1, 0, 2, and 0, 3. Okay, we're going to add these up. And then we're going to divide by the calls, basically, how many grades there were. Okay. Going to do that for each student. So it's the row that's going to change. So the next student will be 1, 0, 1, 1, and so forth. Okay. So for this, we're not going to have that. We're going to use two loops. We'll use them a little bit differently. Okay. So in this case, we're going to have for int r equal 0, r less than rows, r plus plus. That gets us through here. Okay. And then for each student, we're going to go ahead and set this sum. Okay. So we have to have declared somewhere before we get here, usually up here at the top. Let's do an int sum. And I'm going to explicitly set it to 0 for two reasons. I think some of you had a problem on one of the homework problems in not resetting probably a Boolean value. So every time we hit this line that I'm at, I'm on a new student. First student, second student, third student. Okay. So I want to reset the sum to 0. If you don't, the sum will just keep adding up for all the students. Okay. So now that we're here, I can do it the other for loop. Okay. For int c equals 0. C is less than calls C plus plus. Okay. So inside of this loop, go to get my brackets there. Inside of this loop is where I can create my sum. Okay. So right now I have access. The first time I'm here, I have access to the first student's first test score, then their second score, third score, and so forth. Okay. So here's where we're calculating this sum right here. Okay. So I'm going to say here that sum plus equals, which is the same thing as saying sum is equal to sum plus, okay, scores are C, okay. That will calculate the sum. When I get to here, to this point, okay, I'm going to be done with my first student, done with my second student. I'm done with the inner loop, okay. So I can go ahead and see out here. Let's just say that student, we want to give them a student number, okay, since we don't have names. So the name is going to be the row they're on plus 1. Okay. Then we're going to say um, average score is, and then we're going to have the sum divided by the number of columns we have. Okay. So sum divided by columns. Then we'll put our inline and we'll be good. Okay. So that's where we're going on that one. And then here we're done with this. We come back around and that should do it. So let's take a look. See if I've made any typos, because you know me, I could make some typos. Okay. I'm running the wrong program. Let's do the correct program. Let's calculate, or let's compile that program. Okay. Gonna run it, and we see now that the student one average is 86. The student two average score is 85, and the student three score is also 85. Okay. Are those the correct numbers? Easy enough to see. We would just have to add the scores together and multiply them out, but they're in the correct range. So I'm going to assume that it's good enough. You should not assume that, but I am going to assume that. Okay. One thing I'll often do if I want to test, and this is an easy way to test to see if our things seem to be working. Okay. If I go back through and make all the test scores the same, for example, so let's say I make them all 92 for this student. Okay. If you do that, then when you run it, you get the average test score. The first one is 92. Easy to do without any math. Okay. So that's multidimensional arrays. There's a little bit of upkeep here, and that you've got a little bit of extra stuff to keep track of. Okay. But they're important tools. Okay. So again, to summarize, we've got our constant ints for the size if you have more than one array, you can't name more than one thing rows, so you'll have to get creative on that. But we're going to keep track of the size with this. In the next video, we're going to be talking about functions, so that will be important that we pass that along. Okay. We then have the initialization of the array. We don't have to do this. We don't have to put the values here. We could just initialize it and go through a loop and ask the user, and it would work just like it did for single dimensions, more or less. Okay. And then we've also talked about how we access and modify each of these, that we have to put the row and column number in each one. Okay. We're going to use nested loops always to access and to process the data inside of our loops. And then we've ended up with doing a real life example of calculating grades. Okay. So that's multidimensional arrays. They're the same idea as arrays, just extended out a little bit, and can be very helpful depending on the program that you're working on. So the last video on our videos on arrays, we'll talk about sending arrays to functions and the special considerations we have to take.